Like, that's not how it's gonna happen. Like, I actually have to go run and find them. Yeah, so, hello, and welcome to the backyard, the Whitaker backyard.
This is the backyard where we grew up as kids.
Yep. Lots of sled rides down that hill right there.
It looks a lot smaller than it did when we were kids.
It does, a lot, yeah. Tramps back through the cattails into the woods. We had a rope swing over the creek in the back that ended up strangling a deer one time. Do you remember that?
I don't remember it being our thing that strangled a deer. I thought that was somebody else. Or maybe it was ours?
Well, it was, at least, I think it got its horns caught in our thing. Or
I do remember the deer.
We had a game warden come out and assess if it was our fault or something. He said we weren't liable, but
right.
Yeah.
We also built a bridge back there.
And a dam.
Yeah.
And a little fort. We actually made a couple forts back there.
Basically, it's like low-key Everglades. It's a big swamp.
Yeah, it is. But if you get past the front region right here, it gets a little drier back there. But yeah. We had a Yoda's hut fort.
Oh, yeah, that was pretty sick.
We had a little log cabin fort thing we tried to make, and then a bivouac fort. Yeah. It's kind of cool.
Yeah, it was.
Lots of good memories back there.
Yeah, dude. And you've been doing a lot of walking lately.
I have been doing a lot of walking, actually. There was one place that was a little swampy, but otherwise it was mostly dry.
It's mostly good. There's actually way back there a little grove of pine trees that we could, in theory, use for Christmas trees in a few years. I think they are. I think pretty much the same species of Christmas trees, and they're on our property. So if we wait just a couple more years, there were saplings when we went there a while back, but by now they
some
should
of them,
be
I think,
pretty good height
for the size of our
trees.
house.
Yeah, it'd be good.
So yeah, I have been doing a lot of walking because I have been on the walking, the way. Yeah. El Camino.
Yeah, I love how the word Camino, it just means I walk, right?
Yeah.
So it's just,
to say, I'm walking the Caminos. I'm walking.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I just got back from Spain. It's actually 3 days ago.
You must be tired.
I'm not as tired as you might think. A little, sleep deprived, but it's not too bad. It took 4 flights for us to get back.
That's
super
insane.
Obnoxious. Santiago to Madrid, Madrid to Boston, Boston to DC, and DC to Pittsburgh. So highly don't recommend that.
Why did you just come from Boston to Pittsburgh?
Because they only have flights from Boston to Pittsburgh before lunch.
Oh, fun.
So, yeah.
The way there was a little bit of a mess, right?
Yeah, so... so for anyone who's wondering, so the way, or the Camino, is a walking pilgrimage that the full route actually starts in France. And it's an ancient pilgrim path that for the full length is 800 something kilometers, 900 kilometers. And people have been doing this for centuries. I think 800 something was when the first...
Almost 1,000 years.
Yeah.
Or sorry,
over
800 years.
Yeah. And it's a pilgrimage that starts in France, and its final destination is the Santiago Cathedral in Spain. Santiago is Spanish for St. James, and it's the burial for the apostle St. James, which I found out there are only 2 cathedrals, or 2 basilicas/cathedrals in the world that are named after the apostle who's buried in the church.
Wow.
Original 12 apostles.
What was the other one?
St. Peter's.
Okay. Oh, yeah.
So
that's obvious, right?
So yeah, I was asked this year by a former vocation director to lead a partial pilgrimage on the Camino, not the full thing.
For
you
guys, didn't start in France. You started in Spain.
In Spain, yeah. For guys who are considering being in the monastery or becoming religious. So I went with 6 guys and then a priest from our community, Father Romuald, who by the time we flew out of the U.S. had only been ordained 4 days or 5 days.
Are you serious?
Yeah.
Not even a full week?
Yeah, he was. Yeah.
He's a baby priest.
Yeah. He hit his 1 week anniversary while we were there.
That's crazy.
So it was pretty cool. So getting out was just a headache and a half.
Yeah.
We flew from Pittsburgh to D.C., and we were supposed to go from D.C. to Frankfurt, and then from there
right?
to Santiago. Yeah. But our flight to Frankfurt was delayed, and then it was finally canceled. Mm-hmm. And so we were stuck in D.C., had to get a hotel. Well, they got us a hotel, but... then we had to rebook. It was such a mess. It was up for so long. And we finally got a flight the next day to Dublin, and from there to Spain. But the flight from Dublin to Dublin didn't leave until 10 p.m. the next day. So we were literally just sitting around all day in the airport
You stayed in the airport the whole day? Didn't go to DC?
No, we didn't have a car.
Oh.
So we were at the hotel as late as we could be, and then we just were in the airport for hours. We had, messed around, good food, just kind of walked around. We had mass in the airport, actually, in an interfaith chapel, which means there was Muslims praying while we were saying mass.
Were there any other Catholics in there?
No, we were the only Catholics.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So.
But there were Muslims praying at the same time
Yep.
as you guys?
So
That's
in
cool.
his fifth mass ever, Father already had Muslims saying Allah Akbar, kind of thing.
They only say it for special occasions.
Yeah. Okay. Whatever. They were
I'm
saying.
just
So.
kidding.
Yeah. So.
That's hilarious. That's crazy though.
So we finally did get to Dublin, and we landed at 10 a.m. But the great thing about the Irish is that they have Guinness on tap at each gate.
At each gate, you don't have to walk to a bar.
Yeah, no, it was actually literally right by our gate.
That's wonderful.
So 10 a.m., you better believe I was knocking down some Guinness. That made the trip a lot better.
Embracing your partial Irish side.
Exactly.
Yeah. That's awesome.
Actually, I'm supposed to be going to this meeting for these Hibernian. It's this ancient Irish.
Hibernia.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Ancient Irish thing. I don't know. I was asked to go.
By the monastery or?
No, by my rugby coach.
Is it just an opportunity to go drink beer?
And to understand Irish heritage and preserve Irish culture.
Okay,
and
yeah.
I guess they're trying to increase the number of young Catholic men who are in it. So,
okay.
Anyways, side thing. So yeah, got Guinness, made the trip a bit better, and then the crazy thing is one of the guys on our group actually currently still goes to school at TAC. So it's a friend of Nate's. So he's from California. So he flew separately. He was already in Spain. So I was coordinating getting him taken care of and everything. It was just kind of a mess, but it all worked out. We finally got together, all met at our was not our first where we were supposed to start the Camino, which was in Ribadeo, which is right on the northern coast of Spain. Mm-hmm. We were about 14 miles south of that in
you just shaved off some of your
Lorenza. We shaved off the first day, but we met him, Peter, in our hotel, which was basically this lady's house.
Mm-hmm. What is a hostel exactly?
So it's kind of more of a low scale hotel. I mean, some hostels are really primitive, where it's literally a warehouse with 50 bunk beds, and you just get a bed.
You stay in one of
We
those?
did not have anything like that. No, we had private hostels, so that means 2 people to a room.
Okay.
And that one we had completely to ourselves. So it was these 3 stories, really narrow. I felt like I was in a dollhouse. But it was really cool, and they made us dinner. Yeah.
And these hostels are just designed for pilgrims on the way, right? They're not for anything else.
Yeah. I mean, and you could probably stay there for other reasons, but there was ones that are specifically marked with the Camino shell.
Oh yeah.
That's these are
the symbol of St. James.
Yeah. These are reserved or special habitations for people who are walking the Camino.
Gotcha.
So
what were some of the unique moments that stand out from the trip?
Yeah, so we walked an average of 16 miles a day.
Okay.
Little over about 106 miles total in about 7 days. And yeah, I mean, there's so many highlights, and the group was great. Some really funny
How many
guys.
guys?
Six guys and me and Father.
Okay.
So
nice.
8 of us. Some real characters, some goofy quirks everyone had, but no one was crazy or obnoxious.
You meshed pretty well.
Yeah, I would say so. Yeah, everyone got along well. Some of the highlights. Well, one was the group dynamic. Honestly, everyone was really enjoyable to talk to. Everyone had different experiences of where they were in their discernment, and I was able to talk with each of them individually.
That's awesome.
And when you have 16 miles and 4 or 5 hours of hiking a day, you have the time to talk to people.
Yeah.
And it was, I guess, really, it helped me slow down and realize I feel like I don't have time to do those kind of things, but I totally do in my life.
Yeah.
I just waste a lot of my time.
That's so true. Yeah.
And that these conversations actually should be way more normalized or way more frequent. We just think, oh, I don't, yeah. It takes me to go walking on the Camino for these things to happen, and it definitely doesn't.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think probably one of the most memorable days was our 3rd day, and it was our longest. We were supposed to walk about 21 miles that day, and it was long, hot day too. And, we're trucking along.
21 miles. What's the time frame for that? Like, do you have pretty much the whole day, like 12 hours?
Oh,
or
yeah.
so?
You have, well, we left at like 8:30 in the morning. You generally want to be done by like probably 3 or 3:30.
Okay.
So, like.
Pretty hot weather? Or was it?
It was like, that day was probably like 80. That was probably the warmest day we had. So it actually was never scorching or anything. No real humidity either. So, but toasty.
Yeah.
But yeah, so we're going. At like mile, I think like 12, we stopped for like a late lunch at this cafe, and then Father and one of the guys on the trip, Ty, who had shoulder surgery, like only a couple weeks prior, were like a little slower.
Yeah.
So they ate a faster lunch and then just like hey, we're gonna like go ahead. And you guys can catch up with us. So, like, okay. And they got a good ways ahead of us once we finally started moving. But we could see them from, like, a distance on, like, the really wide open roads.
Yeah.
And the places we walked were, like, so different. Some of them were, like, these dirt roads, like, in the middle of dense woods. And then others were, like, major highways.
That's crazy. Yeah, I think I expected it to be, like, look a certain way from just my imagination. I just imagined it was, like, a relatively flat road kind of just through, like, just open fields or something, but then you show me pictures and parts of it look like a hiking trail through woods.
Yep.
And so is it just like, is it kind of like the environment here? Like
there was a couple places that really did look just like Pennsylvania.
Really? Okay.
Some of it looked like the Shire. I mean, with the rolling green hills.
You showed me that. That was amazing.
But yeah, and there was some like drier places that like looked a lot like Southern California where we were a couple weeks ago. So yeah, it was the variety too was really special. And especially with like the Spanish architecture and then how,
sure.
California is very influenced by Spanish architecture.
Right.
I just felt like, I'm California again.
Yeah. No, that's sick. And, okay, so I guess, did you meet any strangers on the trip that stand out in your memory? 'Cause I know often people, like pilgrims, will just bump into each other people they've never met before.
So I'll get to that. I'm going to finish that story though.
Oh, yeah.
So they were ahead of us and we were walking, we crossed this river, and we get to this intersection, and on the Camino, there's, like, these little, like, stone markers that have the shell, which is a symbol of the Camino, and then an arrow pointing which direction to go, and under it, how many kilometers you still have to go to get to the cathedral in Santiago.
Yeah.
Well, we got to this T, and there was one of those signs pointing in both directions, and one lists about, like, 84 kilometers, and one lists 93.
This is when Father's already gone ahead of you. Yeah.
And I'm like, well, those are two different distances, but they're both saying this is the Camino. I'm so confused.
Well, one's probably more direct, right? But
yeah. And we had like this guide. The company I had booked all of like the reservations and the route through, like gave us like a guide and it breaks stuff down, but it didn't say anything about this. Like turn left or turn right.
Right.
So in my mind, like, take the shorter of the two roads. I mean, it makes more sense to me. So we're, like, all right, guys, we're going right. So we're like 3 more kilometers in, and I just realized, like, I don't, that number of how long we have left seems too low. Because we had a breakdown in our guidebook each day of how many kilometers we would be walking. So I real quick did some math, and we were about 9 kilometers short. And I realized, like, that means we should have gone
the other
left.
Way. You're already 3 kilometers into this, so...
Yeah, so I'm like, okay, oh my gosh. Well, at this point, like, now we're, like, 4 kilometers. We're almost 3 miles hiking this direction. I'm like, okay, what are we going to do? And this particular day was unique because where our pension, or, like, where we were staying that night, was, like, off the path. So we were actually going to be picked up in a town by a taxi, driven to our lodging, and the next morning driven from the lodging back to our starting
you had, like,
point.
A time when you're supposed to meet up with somebody?
Yeah. Well, we were gonna call them. Okay. So, but still, so we were not supposed to come across where we're staying on the road, but we turn a corner, run into this little village, and it says like, I don't know, Natural Apartamento, whatever, where we were staying, like 200 kilometers over there.
To stay.
Yeah.
Oh wow.
And we were not supposed to come across this. So
does this mean that you just actually shaved off a ton of time, or were you at the wrong place?
We were in the right place, but not when we were supposed to be.
Okay.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So we went the wrong direction, and we definitely should have caught up with Father and Ty at this point. So I'm like, either they went ahead and like they don't know where we're supposed to be staying, and they just kept on going, so I should go catch up with them, or they went left, which means we're like miles away from them.
Right.
and they don't know where we're getting. Like, they don't know who was picking us up.
Can you not call them?
The service was spotty, 1.
Okay.
And 2, Ty didn't have international calling, and Father had to turn his on.
Oh.
And I tried calling, and he hadn't turned it on. So I'm like, bro, what am I gonna do?
That's terrible.
And then we ran into this French couple where we're walking and asked, like, hey, did you see them? They said, yeah, they went left when you guys went right. I'm like, great. And, you know,
oh my gosh.
if you're taking our walking pace, their walking pace, we're like 6 miles, pushing 6 miles apart at this point.
It's not just like a fork. Like, it's actually
two separate directions.
Okay, yeah.
So we're like between 5 and 6 miles away from them at this point.
Right.
So I told the guys, like, look, there's no sense in you coming, but I'm gonna go run and catch up to them. And they're like, that's insane, don't do that. I'm like, what else am I gonna do?
You're not wearing your habit, right?
No, I was wearing hiking pants and a t-shirt.
Okay. Good.
And
with a backpack on?
Yeah, I wasn't, but I was like, I gave them my backpack because it was about 20 pounds. I'm like, take my backpack, take my passport, go check in, and I'll find you guys.
Right.
But I need to go find them. And some of them were still like, no, like they'll figure it out, or like you can call the cab and they'll pick them up. I'm like, no, bro, like, you know. I mean, I said it a little bit more crass. Like, that's not how it's gonna happen. Like, I actually have to go run and find them.
Wait. Oh well. So they were just going the wrong direction, though, right? Not you guys.
No, they went the correct direction because they were supposed to go.
You said you already had reached your apartment where you're trying
and
to stay.
we weren't supposed to reach it walking. We were supposed to get picked up from a car and brought to that spot.
Oh, yeah, and there was no way you were going to be able to communicate to the other guy in the car that, like, hey, we're already here. So
yeah, exactly.
Okay, I see.
So I just hit the trail and just started running.
Yeah.
And I ran about 6.5 miles to catch up to them.
That's crazy.
And
why didn't you bring the other guys with you?
Because they would have slowed me down.
Yeah, but like they were gonna have to come with you anyway.
No, because I just told them to check into the place. It was right there.
Okay.
There was no need for them.
Communicate. You just needed that one messenger, basically.
Exactly.
Yeah, I see.
And I was the only one capable. Well, Peter probably could have kept up with me.
He's fast. Yeah.
But there was no need for 2 people to run when one person could deliver the message.
That's true.
So yeah, I just booked it, and I actually made some pretty darn good time. I gotta say. There's a couple, and I'd already walked 17 miles at this point, and I ran another 6.5 miles. And the big kicker was at like mile 4, I had to poop so bad.
That's awful.
And we're in the middle of nowhere. I don't have any toilet paper, sleeves, but like it's one of those things that like it's gonna come whether you want it to or not. So I just stepped over the stone wall and just squatted and did my due. And
why are you telling this?
I know, sorry, this is a TMI warning because this is part of the story. Okay, this is the experience one has on the Camino.
Okay, yeah.
I had a handkerchief in my pocket, so
that's vile.
It worked out. Threw it away, and that was a traumatic experience.
Glad you threw that away.
Traumatic experience for me, but it worked. I found them. They were gassed. They had run out of water.
Oh, good. Okay. Well, not good they ran out of water, but good that you caught up to them. Yeah.
We called the cab, had him come and meet us, and we were all good.
Okay.
But
good.
It was just I guess
crazy.
it's a highlight and a memory for me because like I just really felt God's grace is working like really strongly in that because I just kind of like physically after walking 17 miles that day and having walked previously already like a combo of like 35 to 40 miles previously, to just like up and run like a 6:30 pace up and like this trails up in these hills.
That's impressive.
Like this wasn't gonna happen.
Right.
But it did.
That's awesome.
So
even just the motivation for that kind of effort would require grace, I think.
Oh yeah, I was just kind of one of those things like my mind was set to it, and like when I set my mind to stuff, it usually happens. But it was just like another level. Like you have to do this, and no matter how hard you want to stop, it doesn't matter. You have to keep on going.
Yeah, that's awesome.
And that was just kind of a lesson I think I learned from the Camino was like in regards to the spiritual life, and maybe this is something we can talk about, like to get you more involved in the conversation.
Well, I'm enjoying hearing the story,
but that like, so I got tons of blisters on my feet. My feet hurt. My knee hurt. And you know we could complain, but what's that going to get us?
You said the guys didn't really complain.
They didn't complain, and that was really awesome. Yeah. I think because it's just totally futile. Like, what's complaining going to get you? Nothing.
Yeah.
Nowhere.
It can
you have to walk.
It can make things worse.
Yeah, you have to keep on going. So why bother being mad about it or complaining to someone about it? But the lesson I really learned was like the spiritual life. Like, there are havens. Like when you stop for the night, you know, after all that walking, there are havens. But when you wake up, you have to get back on the road. And your body hasn't fully recovered. And it's going to hurt.
Yeah.
And it's going to keep on hurting. And the blisters will form, and then calluses will form on blisters. And then blisters will form. I had actually blisters forming on calluses. Like,
that's wild.
And
it's kind of sick, though.
It's just like realizing, like, you just have to keep on going.
Yeah.
And was I enjoying it all the time? No. Were there times I was like, companionship help? Absolutely. Mm-hmm. And knowing that I was going to have a rest, that was great. But my goal was never any of those hostels. The goal was Santiago. The goal was Jesus. Mm-hmm. And that it's just, it really helped me, like, in the spiritual life, like, translating, like, look, there will be times it will be easy, but it's like, it's mostly just going to be hard. And that's just something we have to accept. And when it's not easy, that doesn't mean anything about God's presence or like his absence, or that we're doing something wrong or we're doing something right. It just means that is the nature of the spiritual life. Yeah. And at the end, I was journaling a little bit when I finally got to Santiago, and something that just really came up was we need to become familiar with the splinters of our crosses. That, like, having them actually dig into us. Like, we carry our cross, but that then by necessity means, like, we're having some of it rub on us and, like, getting splinters of it. Right. And those splinters are going to stay there. Even if we're not holding the cross, those splinters are still in there. And the cross, the cross never actually goes away. Yeah. What's the end of Jesus carrying his cross is actually dying on it. It's not, oh, he's done carrying his cross. No, it means then when he's done with all the weight, all the trial, all the difficulty, he then actually has to die. And I just, that was something I kind of reflected on. No,
I love that. It's like, it kind of reminds me of the idea of the grace of final perseverance. Isn't really something I think people talk about very often anymore, but that's like, for a long time, that's one of the graces that saints would talk about, like, very reverently and with a great deal of emphasis, because, like, there's many graces and virtues that we need in this spiritual life to get to heaven, but one of the most important ones is perseverance, which is, I think, what you're describing, basically. Just the idea, like I remember being a kid, one of the Veggie Tales about perseverance, they kind of define perseverance as, like, the ability to keep on keeping on. Like, you don't always have time to ask questions. You don't always have time to fully rest the way your body wants to, or in this case, the way your soul wants to. But you just have to keep on keeping on. And you're not doing that alone. You have opportunities for grace that boost you, but you do sometimes just have to continue. And I almost wonder, in a pilgrimage, it seems like you'd be defined as a pilgrim, or your merits as a pilgrim lie more in your efforts on the journey rather than just the destination. And there's sort of like a secular idea in there, I guess, that you've probably heard people say often, like, in the secular world, like, it's about the journey, not the destination. Yeah. And just maybe this is tangential, but after experiencing this, going on the way of St. James, and, you know, enduring the hardships of walking on the trail, but also getting to the destination at the end, what are your thoughts on that saying? Like, do you think the merit came in just the journey and the walking, or do you think really it was motivated and made worthwhile by the fact that you got to where you're going?
Definitely, if, like, our goal didn't include something spiritual and Christocentric, it definitely would not have carried the merit or the worth. I do believe I spent like 5 hours in the cathedral on Saturday, just sitting there praying and just being there.
With a huge thurible?
It was there. They didn't swing it, sadly. I was very upset. The pounds of incense were not utilized. Just saddened. Yeah. But one of the guys did buy a mini thurible replica and, like, pounds of incense.
Mitch?
No, actually, one of the other guys.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. But I would say the sweetness of the prayer and the consolation of being in the cathedral was absolutely improved, bettered, whatever you want to say, by the trial of getting there. Like, I think if I'd just flown into Santiago and then gone right to the cathedral, I would have been in awe and would have been like, this is beautiful, and I probably would have felt a connection with God because of the beauty and, like, you know, and the adoration going on. But knowing I'd walked over 100 miles to get there, and that my body had been in pain, and now just sitting in, like, the coolness of the stone church, in the quiet, and that no one's expecting me to do anything now. I don't have to walk. I can just sit here. It was definitely made the rest of that prayer time way better. So while it wasn't, in a sense, just the destination. It was also part of the journey.
Yeah.
They went hand in hand.
Right.
Knowing the destination of it made the journey like worthwhile, and you could do it. But then having the journey is what like beautified the experience of the destination. So I would say that like saying it's not about the destination, it's the journey, isn't complete.
Yeah.
But only saying like, oh well, we're only goal oriented is also not like great. And so like it's definitely it's a both and, which some people don't like both ands, but in the spiritual life I think they're pretty natural.
They are, and I mean that's part of the Christian message, is that like you don't fixate only on the journey, in this case like walking the way of St. James, or in the spiritual life in general, the act of persevering. You don't only fixate on that. You also need to emphasize the goal, like heaven, that we're all striving for, because otherwise the perseverance would be worthless. But you need both, and it seems like both have their own merits. And I know you said like part of what made the journey worthwhile is that your destination was something Christocentric and it was focused on Christ. But it seems like, honestly, the focus on Christ came not only in your destination, but also in the very act of walking. So you were kind of walking in the wilderness, just as Christ did, before his earthly ministry, and you were enduring in some way a form of suffering, which is obviously a Christian archetype. So it seems like kind of our cat's here now. What's up? Trying to crash the podcast. What's up, Dutch? It just seems to me like both elements of it are kind of united in one.
Yeah, absolutely. And doing it in a community, I think, like just like the apostles would have journeyed with Jesus. I was at first, not gonna lie, like kind of annoyed about how the whole like thing got set up. I definitely have always wanted, not always, I didn't always know about the Camino, but since I've heard about it, when we first watched the movie The Way with Martin Sheen, when I was probably like 12 or 13, I've wanted to do it for about 15 years. And this was not the way in which, I imagined doing it. I imagined doing it by myself or with you.
Yeah.
Now I'm doing it in charge of a group. So now I have to worry about where these people are, what they're doing.
You got to organize stuff.
Exactly.
And a lot of it was on you.
All of it.
Yeah.
All of it. I had to organize the plane, the food, all of that. So I definitely kind of went in the first day or two, especially with the cancellations of the flight, like a little bit more turned off, or a little bit like embittered at like, this is not what I wanted.
Yeah.
But definitely the nature of doing it as a group, like, the apostles were a community, the church is a community, and like the communal suffering too also really helped. And you can get that with the fact that there's other pilgrims for sure, but the fact that we were all like in a special way a unit, and had a special bond of fraternity, but also like the clear faith and desire to like know, pursue, and love God. It did help me. I mean, each of the guys in their own way encouraged and inspired me to keep on going, and being able to share with them some of the things that like then I could offer up another mile or two for. And that was something I did before, as I had a little notebook that I wrote down. I asked people for intentions, and I was offering a different intention for every mile. And there was some times where like my feet were just hurting so bad, I would just open it up and just like repeat the intention to myself over and over and over again. Just be like, okay, this step. This is
why I'm walking.
Yeah.
And it seems like in opportunities of shared struggle, you can actually bond with people more deeply than you do when you're just chilling with them, like not doing anything particular.
Yeah.
Like I imagine, I wasn't there, but I imagine the group by the end was probably pretty closely bonded.
Oh yeah. I mean, the guys definitely knew each other, and one of them said like, I think this is like the most substantial human interaction I've had in months.
Really? That's
and awesome. It was like, and it's 8 days.
Right.
You're just with just these people.
Yes.
The whole time.
Oh yeah. No, that's what's amazing about situations like that, is you can bond with people way faster than you would just in the outside world, or when you're not sharing in some mutual struggle.
Yeah.
It's like fast-paced, like accelerated version of forming friendships. It's kind of, I feel like, also a lesson for the spiritual life, is when you join with somebody in a shared effort of perseverance, like striving for heaven, you can actually become very deep friends with them, or friends with them on a very deep and fundamental level. Whereas, this goes back to Aristotle, right? Friendship of virtue is the deepest kind, and it contains pleasure, and it contains some aspects of usefulness. But if it's centered on virtue and it's centered on some good that you're striving for, that's going to be the deepest kind of friendship. Whereas other friendships that are based on less deep things are going to also be less deep.
Yeah, yeah.
They won't develop as quickly. But if you really have a goal, and especially if the goal is something spiritual, you can foster friendship so easily and so quickly, I think.
Yeah, and that was really apparent, I think, among me and the guys, and then them among each other too. You asked about like meeting people.
Yeah. Strangers. Yeah.
Yeah, strangers in the fact that they were foreign to me.
Outside your group, I meant.
Yeah. There wasn't any like strange people. There were actually there was a couple that I saw that I was like, man, you're walking the Camino, like you look like you should be checked into rehab. But that's a different story. Sorry. But there was this.
Can't say stuff like
these.
Go on. Sorry.
These 3 friends who I started talking to. They were like ragging each other for a while about like different accents. There were 2 of them were from Spain. One was from Portugal, but they were talking to each other in English. And they kept on ragging each other about their accents and like, well,
in English?
Yeah, like, well, you're actually more Italian than actually Spanish. And it's like, no, I'm Galatian. It's like, no, if you're Galatian, then you should sound like this. And the other guy's like, hey, I'm Portuguese. I got no say in the matter. And like, I'll be quiet. You look more Arabian than Portuguese. So it was just
making fun of you.
Oh yeah, it was hilarious.
They were obviously friends though.
Yeah. So I just turned around. I was like, hey, your conversation's very entertaining. I just want to tell you guys that. And they're like, oh, thanks. And they're like, hey, why don't you join us? So I walked with them for like 3 miles. We just talked about stuff, and they did. So there's lots of different routes for the Camino. It's not one strict route. So we did the north route. There's also the French route, the Portuguese route, the primitive route. Did I mention the French route? Yeah, I think so.
Maybe.
And so there's different ways to get there.
You said you took the north route?
Yeah. And so they were doing like 100 kilometers of a different route every year, and they've been doing it for a few years. So these 3 friends. Yeah, they were talking about that, and they asked, why are you here? Is this your first time? I said, yeah, and they asked what we were doing. So I told them, and I mentioned I was a monk, and they were really interested in that.
Were they Catholic?
One of them said he used to be Catholic.
Okay.
He said, I don't practice Catholicism per se. He said, but I hold to, like, the morality of Catholicism still.
That's really interesting.
Yeah, which is
Most
like...
people are the reverse.
I know, they, like, do the thing, but not the actual beliefs, right?
Or, like, they are Catholic in identity, but they don't... obey the moral order.
But he's
so
really
that's
interesting.
Really interesting.
So he was very curious. He really liked the idea of like stability in monasticism and like our prayer routine, and he was just fascinated. His mom is a missionary in Argentina.
Wow. Okay.
But then he said, "Hey, do you mind if I ask you a question?" This is like 12 minutes into our conversation. I said, "Yeah, sure." He said, "Is the church in America under attack?" And I said, "Yes, sir, it is."
Yeah.
And he's like, I thought so. He said, from our perspective, it is. And we're all very worried about the American church. He said, because we see it as like the strong representation of Catholicism and then like the West. And he said, Europe is going to follow where America falls.
Really?
And he said, we've pushed back a little bit, but he said, America sets the precedent for Europe. He said, a lot of people don't think that. And he said, a lot of people in Europe like to imagine like, oh, we're completely different from America, or we're better than America. He said, no, they're not. Everyone does what America does.
It hasn't been that way since before the UN. Yeah.
But he said our perception in Europe, he said, is that they're attacking the morals that are held by Catholics, particularly about marriage and family. I was like,
that's
this dude knows what's up
for a guy that doesn't identify as Catholic. That's crazy.
And he started going off about about how like we need to like family is only a man and a woman, and like marriage, and he was really supportive. I was saying a couple things. He's like, yeah, and he said, well, thank you for being a monk, because like you're gonna like save the West. And I said, well, then why didn't you like go become a Catholic again? He's like, I don't know. It's kind of funny. His other 2 friends, his one friend was definitely like he thought I was like Buddhist. But
that's hilarious.
The girl who they was with, she was really into it.
Really? Okay.
Yeah.
I think it's so fascinating that people of other faiths or no faith at all walk the way of St. James.
Yeah.
Like, what are their reasons for doing that? Did they tell you why they were doing it? Or?
They said it was a way for them to stay in contact with each other as friends. I think they went to like the University of Salamanca together, and it was their way to like continue to like the friendship. And they said there was like spiritual components of it for them, just because they're not religious. I know the whole thing is like spiritual, not religious. I'm not a fan of that kind of idea, but there's still some merit to like desiring to connect, with the transcendent or the divine.
Yeah, that's what it comes down to when people say like a spiritual, not religious. I think what they're trying to get at, even though they do it in a very bad way, is they want to have some awareness of what we call the transcendentals. Like they want to get in touch with some kind of goodness or some force of goodness and truth, but they just don't know the concrete way to do it.
And that's definitely what it sounded like. This guy, his name, Rodrigo, maybe? I think that's what his name was.
Hey, Rodrigo. Yeah, that's a good guess.
And
did you tell him about the podcast?
No, I was so close. No, I even brought the bracelets to hand out to people.
You don't have to.
But I didn't know how to insert it.
Shameless plug. He's like, is the church in America under attack? Well, actually it is, but you want to help. Subscribe.
But we kind of started talking about the transcendence.
Yeah.
Because he basically started getting on that if anyone can define truth as whatever they want or beauty as whatever we want, then the world's going to go to hell. And I'm like, dude,
right.
I like this guy.
Yeah, that's true.
And I almost said no. And on that, I host a podcast about the same kind of things. You should tune in. But I was like,
no, that's okay.
You look so conceited if you do
you
something
look
like that.
way too American if you say
exactly.
that. Yeah.
I'm one of the 10 million Americans who host the podcasts.
Yeah.
So it was just it was a quality conversation. And we had different ones. We had this guy, his name was Dennis. He had converted to Catholicism 2 years before. He was walking with his brother.
Let's go, Dennis.
He was walking with his brother who was still Anglican or Episcopal. And he said he was away from his brother. He's like, I didn't tell him this, but I'm kind of walking in hopes that he converts.
Let's go, Dennis's brother.
And his brother, I think his brother's name was Paul.
Let's go, Paul.
He was super encouraged about all of us. He's like, you mean you young guys are taking your summer to discern what God wants you to do and just hike? He's like, that's badass.
That's awesome. These are older guys a little bit?
Yeah, they're probably mid-60s.
Okay.
And the number of old people we ran into was shocking.
Oh, yeah.
We ran into this couple from Australia, both in their 70s. They walked 12 miles a day.
That's insane.
They've been walking. They were doing the full thing.
That's so impressive.
They've been walking since mid-April, and they're like, it's going to take mid-June before we get there. 2 full months, but it'll be okay.
What a thing to do with your retirement, though.
Yeah.
If you don't have any work to do, that'd be sick.
And yeah, we met these French ladies. We were at this one hostel, and Father told them we were saying Mass. They were so excited. Yeah. So after Mass, they're like, well, now, they're 60, 70-year-old women. Yeah. And they're like, well, now we all need to get drinks together. And we were joking, the 19, 20-year-old guys were like, hey, these 70-year-old French women are trying to, get with you guys.
Yeah. That's crazy.
So, yeah, it was.
Not the French Cougars.
What was really special was, see people on and off during days, and then you don't see them for a while.
Yeah.
But then when you get to the plaza of the cathedral, there's just hundreds. More than 3,000 people came into Santiago the same day we did. And then just seeing.
So there's thousands every day. So there's probably
pouring in thousands
over
every
1 million
day.
a year.
It's got to be nuts. The big months are April to August.
Okay. Yeah.
And
I'm trying to imagine when you're walking on the way.
Yeah.
If you look both directions, like ahead of you and behind you, can you normally just see lines of people?
So on the last 2 days, when our route, all the routes converge and to become one, yes.
Okay.
But the first few days, I could look behind and in front of me, and I saw no one.
Wow. So it just feels like you're out in the wild.
The first day, we saw 2 people.
That's crazy.
We walked 17-something miles. We saw 2 people.
That's what I was wondering when you said that you split up from Father and the other guy that one time, and you ran into a French couple who knew where they'd gone. I was like, how many people get past on a daily basis? But
so the north route is a lot more hilly and rural, which is part of the reason I chose it. I didn't want to be walking around a lot of people.
Yeah.
Because I'm just weaving in and out and trying to coordinate a group.
Sure.
But yeah, it was honestly just awesome. Highly recommend.
I want to do it sometime.
We're gonna. St. Vincent hosts both a retreat pilgrimage on the Camino, which is open to anyone, regardless of age or gender. Of the 2 genders that are the only ones that exist. Just putting that out there. But then, at least as of now, this was the first time we've ever done it as a vocation trip, but it's probably going to be a thing. So yeah, if you're a dude and you are thinking about a vocation, you can get on this trip. Way cheaper too, by the way. It was $1,000 for what would be a $4,000 trip.
$1,000 wouldn't even cover the plane.
No, it didn't. It covered half of the plane ticket.
That's crazy.
So yeah, totally worth it. It's an awesome experience. The food was great. The views are amazing. The spiritual connections, both with people and with Christ, that were made, just awesome. Got to go to confession to Father Romwald in the cathedral, which was super cool.
So sick.
He heard like hundreds of like either bilingual confessions. It was very blessed to have him. You know, a newly ordained priest with us. We had mass
outside. Was it not guaranteed
in
you were
the
going to
kitchen.
have any priest?
Oh, I made sure we were going to have a priest.
Okay, because otherwise I feel like that'd be a totally different experience.
Oh, yeah. Because then we would have either had to find mass or we wouldn't have had it.
Go to mass? No, forget it.
So, yeah, when he was being ordained 5 days before, it's like, and speaks fluent Spanish and has done the Camino before, I knew who I was asking.
Yeah. That's awesome.
He's a goat. He's a good dude.
He's a super cool priest.
Yeah.
He looks kind of like Maximilian Kolbe.
He 100% looks like Maximilian
He's even got
Kolbe.
like the round rim glasses and a beard. Yeah.
It's
totally goated.
He is. There's lots more stories I could tell, but I think there's some of the highlights.
You covered the basics, man. You covered the sprinting for 6 miles.
Yep. The up and down hill the first day, almost 3,000 feet of elevation increase.
Wow.
Yeah, that was wild. But it was like so worth it. That'll be the last story. So after that day, it was the first day, all that hills, we finally get into our town, and then there's this big tent set up. And in it, this group comes in and was making octopus. It's called like polenta or polenta, I think. And it's like these basically cut up octopus with like the seasoned and salt. They put on these wooden plates and with a beer. And it was like €11 and like a lot of people could share these plates.
Yeah.
And they only did this like once every 2 weeks or once a month.
Yeah.
Yeah. And there was music and there's like all these biker gangs. There's all these people. There was tons of people. It was so fun.
Yeah.
And the guy who was serving
festival.
us, and the octopus was so freaking tasty, dude.
Really?
Oh my gosh, yeah.
I've had it recently. I wasn't the biggest fan. So
well,
maybe
this
depends on how it's
probably
prepared.
prepared differently.
Okay, yeah.
And they literally just pulled it out and like cut it up with scissors, like
That's
chop,
crazy.
chop, 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 chop.
Oh, that
Put
sounds
in
actually good.
boiling water, figured it out, and they gave us little toothpicks. And then with the beer at the end of a 17-mile day, oh my gosh, it was prime. It felt so festive, so celebratory. And realized, like, man, America's just, like, really lame at doing stuff like that sometimes. We are. And there's, like, everyone, they didn't really know each other, but the guy who was serving is like, chicos! It's like, picto, foto, ti. So he's taking pictures of us.
Yeah.
And he's like, you all have a great day, It was great.
They're just friendly. They're more hospitable probably in those parts of the world than we are here.
America's pretty friendly. It definitely has the...
it's friendly, but like we don't have like our towns and our villages aren't as we don't even have really villages. Like we don't have a sense of a town being like united around something like that.
That's true. Yeah, they're definitely as far as like hospitality and hosting, like these particular towns have an edge because like that's what they've been doing for centuries, is hosting pilgrims.
That's so cool.
Yeah, it was so awesome. So yeah, if you ever get a chance, actually I got a hat here. Got Santiago.
Even got merch.
Yeah. If you ever have a chance to go on El Camino de Santiago, highly recommend. It's totally worth it.
That shell is the symbol.
Yes, of St. James. Yeah, I got to pray at his tomb too, which was awesome.
That's awesome.
He's one of my patrons. My baptismal given middle name is James. So
that's awesome.
Got to see Francisco and James in a calendar year, which is pretty
crazy,
cool.
Dude.
And assuming I'll never find the tomb of Samuel the prophet, I
covered all of them.
Yeah, well, Hyacinth, my confirmation. And one day maybe I'll go to Krakow.
Why is a seashell his symbol?
Yeah, so people ask me about that, and as best as I can tell, is because as an apostle, he would have baptized a lot of people, and a shell is a symbol of baptism.
Mm-hmm. Because they used to use those to scoop up the water, right?
Exactly. And actually, a lot of churches today, their things. I think our parish has a shell.
Yeah.
So I think that's it.
Okay.
And I think there's something else to the symbol of the shell as like of resurrection, like an oyster shell. You open it up and the pearl on the inside. But I also could be totally off on that. That's what I started telling the guys when they asked.
No,
because,
better to have a confident answer than a right answer. If you like.
I agree. Yeah.
Well, then no answer, I should say.
Yeah. If you can't answer, if you can't answer right, at least answer confidently.
Exactly.
So.
Because there's at least a chance you're right.
Exactly.
It's not lying.
And they'll never question. They might not look it up to prove it.
Exactly. So true. But don't lie. Okay. So that was a lit story, or lit few stories. So thank you for sharing. And yeah, y'all should do the Camino. I should do the Camino.
Yeah.
Maybe we can do it again sometime.
Sounds good. And if follow us on YouTube, subscribe, because I'm going to be putting out a little video montage that I narrate some of the days and have lots of videos and stuff that you can see more from. If you go follow me and our page on Instagram too, we have pictures from the Camino up on there. Yeah, do that. Do the thing. It's kind of cool.
Yeah. Thank you for joining us for another episode of All Good in the Brotherhood. I think we're signing out now.
Yes, sir.
Thanks for looking at our backyard.
Adios.